Thank you. What I'd like to do is actually begin with a scene from Iraq. And ahead of you, alongside the road, is what looks like a piece of trash. But that insurgent has hidden that IED, that improvised explosive device, with great care. Now, by 2006, there were more than 2,500 of these roadside bombings in Iraq every single month. And they were a leading cause of casualties among both American soldiers as well as Iraqi civilians. Now, the team that's hunting for this IED is called an EOD team, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. They're the pointy end of the spear in the effort to stop roadside bombings. In a typical tour in Iraq, an EOD team will go out on just about 600 bomb calls. That is, they'll be asked to defuse about 2 bombs every single day. The number that may be the better indicator of their value is the fact that the insurgents put a reported $50,000 bounty on the head of an EOD trooper. Kill one of them, get $50,000. Unfortunately, this particular bomb call would not end well. And by the time the soldier got close enough to the device to see the telltale wires coming out from it, to see that it was a bomb, not a piece of trash, it exploded. Depending on how much explosives is packed into one of these devices, you have to be as far away as a football field to escape injury from the fragments coming at you at bullet speed. In fact, even if you're not hit, just the sheer force of the explosion itself can break your limbs. The soldier, though, had been right on top of that bomb when it exploded. And so when the dust settled and the rest of their team advanced, they found little left. And that night, the commander of their unit did their sad duty. They wrote a condolence letter back to the United States. They apologized for not being able to bring that soldier home. They talked about how the rest of the troops in the unit considered them their bravest soldier. But then they also tried to talk up the silver lining that they took away from the tragedy. And this is what they wrote. Quote, "At least when a robot dies, you don't have to write a letter to its mother." That scene may sound like a cross between the movies Hurt Locker and Avatar, but is the actual story of the very first robot killed in action. The soldier killed was a 42-pound robot called a PackBot. The destination of that condolence letter wasn't some farmhouse in Iowa like in the old war movies, but was a company just outside Burlington, Massachusetts, that on the side of the wall says, "I, Robot." It is a real-world company named after the fictional Isaac Asimov novels and the not-so-great Will Smith movie, in which robots start out doing daily chores and move on to making life and death decisions. Now, I am not one for PowerPoint. In fact, we've banned it from my institution. But the Microsoft people told me I wouldn't get a swag bag unless I used PowerPoint. So what you're going to see is actually not one of the click-through presentations, but simply a series of pictures and images and videos that are going to play behind me, not timed to my talk or anything, but rather just to give you a sense of the reality of this technology. Everything that you see here is either already operative in Iraq and Afghanistan right now or already at the prototype stage. Nothing is fantasy. Now, to pull back on all this, the book that I wrote, Wired for War, is about how there's something big going on in war today and maybe even the overall history of humanity itself. The U.S. military force that went into Iraq in 2003 had a handful of drones, pilotless planes, unmanned aerial systems, whatever you want to call them. We now have over 7,000 in the U.S. military inventory. The invasion force on the ground utilized 0 unmanned ground vehicles. We now have over 12,000. To give you another example of the sea change that's happening, this year the U.S. Air Force will train more unmanned systems operators than it will train manned bomber and manned fighter plane pilots combined. What we have to remember, though, is that these Predators, these PackBots, are the first generation. They're a lot like the Model T Ford or the Wright Brothers Flyer compared to what's already in prototype stage and what comes after that. And the technology term killer app, short for killer application, takes on an entirely new meaning when you're talking about these technologies. They're not just disruptive to industry, to war. We are arming them with everything from 50 caliber machine guns to Hellfire missiles. That's what's happening right now. Peering forward, one U.S. Air Force 3-star general that I met with described how very soon it's not going to be thousands of robots that we use in our wars as today, but, quote, tens of thousands. But it's not going to be tens and thousands of these robots or the next ones that you'll see after that. It's the ones that come later on, generation after generation. Because one of the things that you're familiar with, of course, is Moore's Law. The idea that we've been able to pack more and more computing power into our microchips such that they basically double in their power and capacity just about under every 2 years. Moore's Law in action is, for example, the reason that if you've ever gotten one of those Hallmark greeting cards that opened up and played a little song, if you've ever gotten one of those, you held in your hand more computing power than the entire US Air Force had in 1960. That's Moore's Law in action. Now, if Moore's Law holds true over the next 25 years, our systems, our computers, but also our robots, will be 1 billion times more powerful than today. And I don't mean 1 billion in kind of the amorphous Dr. Evil 1 billion way that people use that term. I mean literally take their power and multiply it with a 1 and 9 zeros behind it. What if Moore's Law doesn't hold true? Yeah, it's held true over the last 40 years. There's no guarantee that it's going to hold true over the next 25. What if it goes just 1/100th as fast? Well, that means that our computers, our robotics, will be a mere 1,000,000 times more powerful than today. So the point here is this. The kind of things that we used to only talk about at science fiction conventions like a Comic-Con need to be talked about by folks like us gathered here. They need to be talked about by people in the Pentagon. We are living through a robots revolution. Now, I need to be very clear here when I say robots revolution, particularly in this state. I don't mean that the Governator is going to show up at your door, all of the Terminator movies. It's the idea that every so often in history, there's a technology that comes along that is revolutionary, that rewrites the rules of the game. And most important, it's not its capabilities that truly matter, it's the questions that it forces upon us that really matter. Questions about what's possible that we didn't have to even think about what was possible before. But even more important, questions about what's proper. Questions of right and wrong that we didn't have to wrestle with before. When you go out and ask people in the field the historic comparisons to where they see robotics now, they illustrate this revolutionary aspect. For example, most of the scientists will tell you that, in essence, we're at this stage with robotics where we were with automobiles around 1909. Even how we termed them, unmanned systems, horseless carriages, where we can only wrap our heads around what they are not rather than what they are. Ford Motor Company in 1909 sold just about 250 Model T Fords, but spurred on by the demands of war, within 10 years it was selling 1 million of them. But why did the automobile matter? Did it matter because you no longer have to own 4 horses and keep them in a stable? Or is it ripple effects out on the world? Mechanization in war, but also in society, which leads to things like, for example, suburbia. No automobile, no suburbia. Leads to social ripple effects. Things like dating. The very concept didn't exist before automobiles because kids had to court on their parents' front porch before they got the freedom of the automobile. We see environmental effects that come out of that with global climate change. But even more important, we see a demand for an entirely new rules of the road, traffic laws that we didn't have to conceive of before, and rules that require an understanding of the technology itself. So, for example, the very first traffic laws entailed that someone was supposed to walk in front of the horseless carriage with a flag to warn people, and when they got to an intersection, they were supposed to fire off a flare. Another parallel that people make, and this is one that Bill Gates made, is that we're with robotics right now where we were with the computer back in 1980. Big, bulky device, limited set of functions that we figured out for it, and most importantly, the military is a prime spender on research and development, as well as a prime spender in terms of client for the marketplace. But again, why did the computer matter? Well, very soon, we learn more and more functions for it. And soon it gets to the point that we stop calling them computers anymore. I have a computer in my kitchen. I call it a microwave oven. I drive a car that has over 100 computers. I don't call it a computerized car. And the same thing is playing out with robotics. So, for example, you have the new Lexus that parallel parks itself. Or you have the Volvo and the Mercedes-Benz cars that have crash avoidance technology, which is a very nice way of saying the robot car takes over because the stupid humans don't look in their blind spot a lot. But again, computers matter not just because of the processing power, but the ripple effects out on our world. They